All right, good evening. Uh, Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Juan Rivero, East Village and Special Projects Director for Village Preservation. Village Preservation is hosting tonight's virtual City Council District 1 Candidate Forum with our partners, the Bowery Alliance of Neighbors, East Village Community Coalition, Friends of the Lower East Side, Historic District Council, and Lower East Side Preservation Initiative. We are all community-based nonprofits that depend on the public for support. So if you like what we do, please join, make a donation, find out more, tell your friends. It will make you more popular. All of our websites have been dropped in the chat. Village Preservation holds about 80 public programs like this each year, mostly free and open to the public. So let me say a few words about the format before we get started. Each candidate will get 1 minute for opening and closing statements. The moderators, Richard and me, will ask a series of questions, and each candidate will get 1 minute to reply. We ask that the candidates please write down the questions so that we don't have to repeat them. There's a lot of us, so by the time it gets to you, the memory might have lapsed. So keep that in mind. The order of the participation will be changed throughout the program. We will, after we go through those first two, after the opening and the questions, we will then ask questions from the audience, which they can submit at any time through the chat function of your Zoom window at the bottom. Unless a question is directed to a specific candidate, all candidates will have the option to respond for up to 1 minute. We ask the candidates who wish to respond to please raise their hand. Because of the number of candidates, the response time limits will be strictly enforced. So please be mindful of that and abide by that limit, those limitations. This is not recent presidential debate rules are not in effect, so we're going to be far more strict than that. A recording of tonight's event will be made available to the public via the Village Preservation website and YouTube page. And Village Preservation has also asked all candidates to fill out a more detailed questionnaire that we will also be making available to the public. So over to you, Richard.
Oh, thanks, Juan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Moses with the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, and I'm pleased that we have with us this evening 7 candidates: Juan Hayes, Gigi Li, Susan Lee, Jenny Lowe, Maude Maron, Christopher Marte, and Tiffany Winbush for New York City Council District 1. District 1 encompasses most of Lower Manhattan, including roughly the Lower East Side below Houston Street, Chinatown, parts of Greenwich Village, and the Bowery, and then south to Battery Park and Governor's Island. The candidates will be running in the Democratic primary on June 22nd. The winner of that primary will then run in the November general election. All District 1 candidates who are receiving public funds were invited to tonight's event. The current City Council member, Margaret Chin, will be term limited out and therefore is not running in this election.
Good.
As Juan said, each candidate can make a 1 minute maximum opening statement, and we're going alphabetically. So we'll start with you, Sean. And again, please remember, we'll be cutting everyone off after their allotted time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very, very fast here. I'm Juan Hayes. I'm the head now of an international law firm. I was also a faculty member teaching law, and I happen to have the opportunity to teach real property law, and I can even answer questions on the rule against perpetuities if anyone wants to know about that. Only a joke there, but I'm here to actually learn. I'm definitely not an expert on all of the issues. I've been in this district with my office for 15 years, but I'm still learning. I think Andrew Berman put forward an excellent scope of what he feels like, and I think other people have also read it. And I hope today we will have people actually answering questions and not just dealing with fluff and fill. So I'm Sean, and my website can be found at seanhayes4newyorkcity.com, and I have a plans on there for affordable housing and for all the major issues that we're facing in this city. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Sean. We'll follow with Gigi. I don't know if we're having a problem with the timer. Here we
there, it's
go.
up now.
Thank you.
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to all the groups that are sponsoring today's forum focused on preservation. I've had the opportunity to meet and speak and work with many of you over the years. I think many of you know me from my close to a decade of experience serving Community Board 3, 4 years as chair, and currently while on leave as the Chief of Staff for Councilmember Margaret Chin. I actually started being involved locally because my experience as a social worker was very infuriating around the bureaucracies and navigating government for families that were in shelter as one of my first jobs. And that propelled me to be more involved, act more locally. And so I'm happy to be here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks, Gigi. Susan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Lee, and I am a lifelong New Yorker. I grew up in the Lower East Side in what was then Councilmember Margarita Lopez's district. And I have seen the city change so dramatically that sometimes I am lost for words. We need to honor our history, be responsible in our development. I think a lot of times when we look at places in other countries, churches are repurposed to be used as cafes and libraries. So I think that we really need to look at how we can preserve history, since our district is actually one of the oldest neighborhoods in the founding of the United States. So I am happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to sharing more with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jenny.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight. I am running for City Council because I am a lifelong resident of Lower Manhattan, and I've spent more than 30 years working as the nonprofit leader and helping to support folks in Lower Manhattan. As an immigrant, I learned English when I in public school, went to Yale, came back because this is the community that raised me. I have a long track record of experience and skills that support the community in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, and in the public sector. I currently serve as the Director of Internal Operations at the City Council. I want to use my experience to help us recover from this pandemic and bring equitable resources to our community. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Jenny. Maude?
Hi there, everyone. Well, I will say that, first of all, thank you to all the partners and hosts of this forum for inviting us. I have also lived downtown for quite a long time. I've lived here for over 3 decades. I currently live in Soho, but I previously lived in NoHo on Great Jones Street, and before that on St. Mark's Place in the East Village. But I am a public school parent raising my 4 kids who are public school kids downtown. My platform, which you can check out at maudemaron.nyc, has focused a great deal on public safety and the fact that we need clean, safe streets and subways if we're going to come out of this pandemic as strongly as we all know we need to. Public schools, they need to be open and they need to be excellent, and supporting our small businesses. We lost over 1/3 of small businesses during this pandemic, and we need to focus on that recovery.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for hosting this event. My name is Christopher Marte, and I'm running for City Council District 1. I was born and raised on the Lower East Side, went into local schools, was always involved in my community. But the reason why I got involved in politics was because my dad's bodega was priced out because of rent hikes. Neighbors that I grew up with were priced out or evicted from their apartments. And when I started seeing and connecting the dots of how our elected officials and developers use land use as a way to drive up the costs of not only residential, but small businesses, and eventually force them to be evicted, is what led me to run for city council. And in 2017, I ran with a really grassroots coalition that brought together parents in Tribeca, restaurant workers in Chinatown, and artists in the Lower East Side to really make sure that people understood what this power was when it comes to land use. Sadly, we lost, but since then, we've been able to get major victories, which I'm happy to discuss later on in this forum. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Tiffany?
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight. I am a 15-year plus resident of Lower Manhattan. New York City is my chosen home. I have roots in Louisiana, but I spent most of my time in the Lower Manhattan since moving to New York City. It's a place where I became a partner to my husband. It's where I became a parent to 2 public school children. It is where I've made lifelong friends. I come from a family of helpers, so being of service has been taught to me very on in my life. I am a leader who, when elected to the New York City Council, will lead with empathy. I will have the best interests of everyone throughout the district in mind. Please visit my website, tiffany4nyc.com, to learn more, and I look forward to sharing more about myself tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So on to the first question. We'll be changing the order of folks responding with every question. So the first question is, what is your position on the proposed Soho NoHo rezoning? And please be specific about what you support, what you oppose, and why. And we're going to start out with Chris.
Thank you for this question. I am against the current proposal to upzone Soho and NoHo. Since the very first meeting in the cafeteria at MS 130, I went with neighbors and realized that this process was a sham. And so we helped organize to create our own town halls to educate residents of the flaws of this plan. And there are many, right? Developers can build as high as they want with no affordable housing. They're going to change how big box retail can take over Soho and NoHo. I support the community alternative plan that I know Village Preservation and a lot of people on this call also support and created. And that's the type of plan that we need to move forward. We have to make sure that our tenants are protected, especially our artists. But we also have to make sure that people can live in legal apartments. And so it's making sure that we continue to educate the public on the flaws of this plan, but show them that we have an alternative that can work. And as your next council member, I'll work to pass that alternative.
Thank you very much, Chris. Gigi?
Thank you for the question. So in previous debates, I have said that I support the conversations for NoHo Soho rezoning moving forward. Since the release of the plan, while I do believe that every single neighborhood should help with the affordable housing crisis in the city, I feel like the current plan has a lot of shortcomings. It does not clearly address how it will save the arts and culture community. It also, I would like to see the FAR be outside of the Soho Historic District. And I also don't feel like there's a clear path forward on how the JLWQA will work. And so I have some very serious reservations with the plan moving forward.
Thank you very much. Jenny?
So I'm against the plan as currently proposed. We need to make sure that any development in any neighborhood must be led by community with real input, not by the developer or city hall. The plan currently as proposed does not have enough affordable housing, and the plan that it is being discussed really ushers in big box stores and pushes out the small businesses that are thriving. And also the upzoning will change the characteristic of the nature of Soho NoHo. And I am against it because it does not have a comprehensive planning for services like childcare center, schools and social services and others. And the community preference is a way to lock out people of color. And that is not a plan that I would support.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Maude?
Sure. I'm afraid it's not going to make for an interesting answer, but I agree with a lot of what my fellow candidates have said. I happen to live in Soho, and I am a big supporter of preserving historic districts and historic neighborhoods and historic landmark buildings. And so I have my concerns on that front. But I will say more broadly, what concerns me about Mayor Bill de Blasio's overall approach to plans like this is that it's held out as a promise to create more affordable housing, but it fails to grapple with the fact that we'll actually lose, particularly in Chinatown, real affordable housing that exists currently. It runs a very real risk of us losing rent stabilized and rent controlled, truly affordable apartments for a plan that is billing itself as something that's supposed to create more affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Maude. Sean?
Yes, I'll have to say that previously I've also said I'm for it. I actually said thumbs up. We were asked one time to answer speed questions, and I said thumbs up. After I read it and it actually came out in May, the way it's put forward, that it's going to promote affordable housing seems to be just not true. So that's the biggest issue I have. And the actual number of affordable housing is much lower than what was first spoken about. And I think what we need to focus on is what happened here. Why did this flip happen? The mayor flipped at the last minute. It seems like at the end of the year, he was thinking something else and he suddenly flipped. I think we need to get to the root cause. This city is broke, and this city is trying to do anything it can to get money. And what it's doing right now is selling assets that we should really keep in our hands. Time is very short for these complicated questions.
It is indeed. Thank you, Sean. Susan, please.
Thank you for the question. So I am against the Soho NoHo plan, and I agree with all the candidates before me that spoke about it. However, I think one of the interesting things is we need to really look at expanding the AMI ban, because what is proposed that is affordable isn't really affordable for most people, and I think that we really need to examine that. And additionally, there is no affordability housing unit mandate for community facility, which is a loophole for NYU expansion. And I think that that's something that we really need to look at and evaluate how this plan is affecting, the characteristic of Soho and NoHo. And I think that, bringing big box store in is really not in the interest. Soho NoHo is very unique. I love the mom and pop boutiques that were there, and I hope that we can bring those back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And last but not least, Tiffany.
Thank you. So I think we all can agree that we certainly need more affordable housing in New York City. I know when I relocated here 15 years ago, I received sticker shock like many people who decided to call New York City home. I do not support this plan with the Soho NoHo upzoning for several reasons. Number one, once again, it's no surprise. It does not include community input from the very onset. That's something that we need to do if we are going to dramatically change a neighborhood. So I think that we need to go back to the drawing board, take into consideration what the residents want, listen to the plan that they've put together, and then move forward from there. We don't want the Soho NoHo community to end up like other communities across New York City that have been rezoned and unfortunately have pushed people out. So I do not support this plan. I think we can make it better. I know that we need affordable housing, and with collective effort, we can certainly make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Over to you, Richard.
Okay, thank you. What is your opinion of the job the current District 1 Council member Margaret Chin has done, especially in relation to preservation and development issues? How would you differ from her or be similar as council member? And we'll start with Maude.
Sure. Well, I'll say that I live in Soho, as I mentioned, and there are a lot of residents who have felt very neglected by the current city council member, not just in Soho, in other neighborhoods as well. There has been a feeling of not, especially towards the she's been there for 12 years, especially towards the latter end, not being highly engaged by communities outside what people sometimes think of as her base. But I will also say that I've been walking around our district and talking to lots and lots of people, and Margaret Chin has done a great job of being supportive and reaching out to seniors in our neighborhood and being supportive of senior citizen issues. And I commend her for it, and that's something that I would want to continue and build upon because I think it's incredibly important. And so I think you should be able to assess somebody in both where their failings have been, and certainly community outreach to our many broad, different, diverse communities is important, and that needs to be improved. But I commend her for her work she's done with senior citizens.
Okay, thank you, Maude. Next is Sean.
Yeah, I think at the end of her term, she was a failure at heeding the advice of people in the Lower East Side. They felt that she was giving them lip service and that's it. And I feel the same at the end of her actual term. But she was very good at the start of her term of engaging with voters, understanding the actual needs of voters, but not at the end of her term. The way I would be different is I would always have an open door policy. So I would love to have community meetings each week. And also, I'm the type of person, I'm not stubborn. I don't have a strong belief in there's a specific answer to problems. We can learn and grow and study and understand more. And I think that's what we fundamentally need, more active people that can understand problems and come to answers to those problems. And this is a work. It's not just an end.
Okay, thank you. Jenny?
Sure. I think the current council member has done a good job in a number of areas. As Maude Maron said, she really did a great job for the seniors, and we owe a lot to her for what she has done. And that's one of the reasons why I supported her when she ran for re-election. Where I see that I would be different in how I handle the constituent services is that my office door will be open, and I will be listening to opinions and views from different perspectives, even if people do not agree with me or we're holding different views on how something is handled, where I feel that the current council member failed is where she does not listen to people who do not agree with her. She still owes a call to many of us asking for open street for Chinatown a year ago with a letter written to her office. It didn't happen. Nothing was returned to us seeking to help the small businesses recover. So that's what I would be different, is keeping an open door and listening to people with different views.
Thank you. Thank you. And Chris?
When you look at the land use issues that we have across the district, I think she has failed this district. From Governor's Island to the historic South Street Seaport to the NYU development to two bridges to the Chinatown jail, we've seen a failure in community engagement, community planning, and actually representing what the community wants in our neighborhoods. 8 years ago, our council member had an opportunity to pass the Chinatown Working Group Plan, which was a community-based land use policy, and she said it was too ambitious. However, she never thought a developer-driven land use process like the Soho and NoHo, I never called it too ambitious. And so when we look at who has she been representing, in my opinion, she hasn't been representing us. In 2017, less than 50% of the voters voted for her. And that's because people were frustrated with her administration in their first two terms.
Thank you. Tiffany?
So just last week, under the recommendation of Councilmember Chin, the full body of the council voted to allow upzoning on Governor's Island, right? So essentially that means that a space where New Yorkers consider a piece of, property or land that's, invaluable because we are a city with so many people, will now have, tall buildings, unfortunately. So those are the type of things that, when residents say she's not listening to the community and what we need, that's one great example. I know, Christopher mentioned several other projects that are going on in our community where community members have really said, we need you to listen to us. This is not best for our community. And those have not gone heard. So I am just hopeful going forward. And I, as a city council I will make sure that I'm listening to all residents within the district. It is necessary.
Thank you. Gigi?
Sure. So I think the current council member has been, one area that she has done well in is that she has really brought affordable housing to Lower Manhattan. And I think for that, and particularly senior housing as well. So I think in that area, she does deserve a lot of credit. When it comes to how I will be different and potential shortcomings, one, I will not be hesitant, especially on land use items, to speak out against the administration or city agencies where I think it's warranted from the beginning. And I will also be very transparent about where my reservations are and what needs to be modified during a ULURP process, and not be and really take my vote of voting no, even if the whole process happens and the end result is not what is best for this community.
Thanks. Susan?
I thank you for the question. I think that, all of us can agree on a lot of issues that the current council member has done a good job in, such as senior services and affordable housing. However, I think that, with land use, I've been very disappointed. Last week, my campaign came out with a statement, strongly opposing the upzoning of Governor's Island, and the next day it was approved. And we don't really need high density, high rises on Governor's Island. It's a 7-minute ferry ride from Lower Manhattan. But what really frustrates me was the revocation of 135 Bowery. That was a landmark building, and Councilmember Chin withdrew her support for that building, and that building has since been demolished and turned into a glassy building that has no architectural significance. So that is one of the things I'm very frustrated with the current council member.
Thank you. Juan?
Sure. Next question. So Chinatown, the Lower East Side, below Houston, are neighborhoods widely acclaimed for their role over the last 2 centuries, really as probably the most important center for immigration into the country, and as home to world-renowned cultural arts and political activism. If you believe that historic preservation of the built environment plays an important role in educating people about history, what's the best way for preservation to be used by government and by the private sector to share this history with the generations of today and tomorrow? And we will start with Maude.
Sure. Well, it's certainly true that we have an extraordinary amount of history. On my campaign Instagram, we have been running through some of the different historical sites that we have downtown. And we already see, we don't have to reinvent this wheel, we already see a really great combination of our city agencies, but also private institutions. If you think of the Tenement Museum downtown and what it does in terms of sharing a history of the Lower East Side, making an interactive a place for people to visit, to learn about the history, and that is also, a destination where whether it be school kids or tourists or local folks can go and learn about the history of downtown. We need to support institutions like that, but we also need to make sure that our landmark neighborhoods are protected and safe in order to preserve that history.
Thank you very much, Maude. Sean?
Yes, our city dies without tourism. And I think that's the biggest issue that we have in saving buildings, saving culture, saving arts. I think the major problem that we have promoting anything by New York government is it's done poorly. I sent people to an SBA type office in here, and you can see how they run these offices. They're supposed to help people build businesses, and they can't even keep their actual office clean. So I think this talk of how government's going to help, we still need to focus on cleaning up government in of itself. Our city government is broken. And what we need to do is get more professional management in city government. And this needs to come from the outside. We need a professional tourism organization, and we need a professional arts and culture organization, and we don't have one now.
Thank you very much, Sean. Jenny?
For us to be able to preserve the legacy of the very important role that Lower Manhattan played in the history of our country, it is important for us to have preservation efforts that are very thoughtful and also find ways to also include that in the school curriculums and definitely in the lower for schools that are in Lower Manhattan, where the students can learn about the history and the important role that we play. So I would support working collaboratively with the Landmark Commission to help preserve that. For example, in the most recent project on Broome and Norfolk Street, where the historic synagogue was located, there was a project to be built, and I worked with the board of the organization that was supporting building a new complex there to preserve the synagogue. Sadly, it was the fire was destroyed it, but we are able to keep artifacts in the location where a new building will be built. So we need more of those kind of effort in every corner of our district.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Chris?
Yeah, preservation tells a lot of stories, right? It tells the stories of immigrants, but more recently, it tells the story of activists. I know many of us have been on the Jane Walk, and it really just shows us how we fought back a pro-development, racist city planner in Robert Moses. And this is the type of education that we have to teach our kids, teach tourists, that this city, even though it continues to evolve, a lot of our history is in our community gardens and the buildings. Even when you walk to the Lower East Side, you can see some of the influence from the German immigrants, the Jewish immigrants, in Chinatown, the Asian immigrants. And that's what makes our neighborhood so beautiful and gives it its unique character that people from all around the world want to come visit. And so it's making sure that we have a council member that's going to continue to preserve this and increase landmarking of historic buildings and district, but also making sure that LPC is held accountable when they allow something like Howard Hughes to move forward with their development. And so it's just not working with these agencies, it's helping to keep them accountable.
Very much, Chris. Tiffany?
I think the best way to preserve our community and our wider neighborhood is to teach the next generation that information. There is currently in our country a pushback on teaching our students within school settings about the history of our nation, but it's something that we absolutely have to do. There are not enough people who know about the African burial ground that's in CB1. There are not enough people that know that on the steps of Wall Street, the financial capital of the world, that enslaved people were once sold there. We need to make sure that we put this education within our schools so that our students will know this and they will be able to hold on to this for the future generations and preserve it and then share this message to others beyond them. So it really starts at a school level. That's how we can preserve this information. So we need to make sure that within all of our schools in the most diverse city in the world, that we're learning about diverse people within our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Gigi?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of the things that the other candidates have said. I would go a step further and say, as council member, what's very important is that organizations like the partners that are sponsoring today's forum actually have a seat at the table with LPC and with the council member to develop a plan around a combination of designating individual landmarks, proposing special districts. Before the pandemic, we were gaining a little bit of momentum looking at a Lower East Side special district. It's something that has been talked about for a while. And one of the challenges was outreach in different languages, engaging in different hours because of the property owners and the small businesses. And I think that that kind of outreach and that kind of very local knowledge is exactly what groups like yourselves bring to the table, and that the council member can help facilitate so that there is more of a comprehensive planning process moving forward.
Thank you very much, Gigi. And lastly, Susan?
Yes, so As a resident of downtown, and, growing up in the Lower East Side, I had the privilege of looking at all these old, wonderful, historic buildings. I worked at 125 Broad Street, right out of college, and Francis Tavern was right there. And it was amazing to know that part of history. We have all these private companies in New York that I think we should do a private-public partnership, offer some synergy, so that we can use technology and do walking tours perhaps, so that people not only in the district, but in the Upper West Side can tune in and know about the historic nature of our district and also the need for preservation. Give them a historical background and also talk about the need to preserve. Corky Lee used to walk around Chinatown and give these historical tours. I think that we need to do that and record it and broadcast it so others can enjoy.
Thank you, Susan. Richard?
Okay, thanks. Do you support Lespies and Friends of the Lower East Side's proposal for the creation of a new historic district in the Lower East Side, south of Delancey, in the blocks around the Tenement Museum, on Orchard Street, south to Canal, and then from Essex to Forsyth Streets, east to west? And a link to a map of this district will be dropped, or has been dropped, in the chat. So we're going to start this time again with you, Susan.
Yes. I don't know enough about the plan to say definitively if I support it or not, but I do think that historical districts are important. I live in one myself. I know that for me as a property owner, there are rules and regulations I have to follow, and it could be cost prohibitive for someone, for some of the low-income residents. So I don't know enough about that plan, but I do support historical preservation of the historical districts.
Thank you. Next, we have Tiffany.
Yes, so just kind of to piggyback on what Susan said, I don't know enough about the plan to give it a yay or a nay, but I know that our District 1 covers, as we've mentioned previously, some of the most historic communities across New York City, if not across the nation. Those are things that do need to be preserved. We need to be able to preserve that information so that we can share it with future generations. We don't want to see ourselves once again being faced with our nation, for instance, celebrating the centennial of the Tulsa race massacre and so many people not knowing what happened 100 years ago. So we don't want that to seep over into New York City and into our history. So if a dedicated historic will make sure that we don't forget about the history of our community, I can fully support that.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes, I support it. A lot of these buildings are being threatened because we don't have protective zoning in place. And that's why we need to have a historic district plan for the Lower East Side to continue to preserve that history. So I fully support it. And I actually live within the plans district, so I know what the buildings look like.
Thank you. Maude?
Yes, I do support it as well. And I live in a historic district. And so I do know that without the historic preservation that's been now for many decades in Soho, we wouldn't have many of the buildings we have. We're talking 4- and 5-story buildings, and many of the buildings here wouldn't be here. The historic nature of the buildings and the neighborhood as a whole deserves protection.
Thank you. Gigi?
Yes, so it's like I knew that was going to be your next question. So absolutely. In fact, I have gone on walking tours with some of the landmark supporters and members of this group and other groups, and that we had started that process, and we had begun engaging property owners and small business owners and having those conversations. And it's absolutely a process that I would commit to continuing as the next council member.
Thank you. Sean?
I don't know the specific details of the plan, but that area definitely needs to be designated a historic district. I don't know specifically what what the land use law would be for things like cafes and things that bring in tourism and bring in more people to appreciate the area. If I knew more about that specific issue, I would say 100% thumbs up if we can still open those cafes and shops and areas that people need to go after going to the tenement museum and visiting the areas.
Thank you. Jenny?
So I was, so I don't know all the details, but I've seen the map, and the way I would be as a council member is that I would look to the stakeholders who are impacted by such a designation, property owners, small businesses, and residents. I would want to hear what they want to do and what their input is, because sometimes when we don't listen to those who are in the blocks or in the neighborhood, then we may have unintended consequences. And that is not something that I would support. So if the local community residents of the blocks that you outline in your plan are supportive of it, I'm sure would want to be part of that as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Okay, Juan?
Thank you, Richard. Next question. So the area around Oliver Street, St. James Place, Henry, and Madison Street is notable for its collection of intact historic buildings, as well as for being the place where former Governor Al Smith grew up and lived. Lesby is looking to create a historic district on these blocks, and a link to a map has been dropped in the chat. Are you familiar with this area, and what would your position on such a historic district be? And the first up is Gigi.
Yes, I actually am very familiar with the area. And when I was growing up, my pediatrician ran his office out of one of those houses. So I am very familiar with what and how beautiful the inside, not only the outside of the row of houses. And I think absolutely that block should be designated or landmarked or given some sort of special consideration moving forward.
Thank you, Gigi. Jenny?
So I spent my high school year working for a doctor whose office is in one of those buildings on Oliver Street. So I'm very familiar with that neighborhood, and also the cemetery that has a lot of historical figures in as well. Again, I would want to make sure that I listen to the residents and the property owners and the small businesses that are in that neighborhood, including those who are in the Mariners Temple. With a 226-year history, want to make sure that the parishioners there also have input in such a designation, and I will go along with what the neighborhood folks want.
Thank you, Jenny. Maude?
I'm going to echo a lot of what Jenny said. I am familiar with the neighborhood. I used to work, I work downtown, and my offices were closer to Tribeca, but I spent most of the working day at 100 Center Street. And you know, this neck of the woods is very close to the courthouse. So it happens to be a particularly lovely area, and the houses on Oliver Street are very pretty when you walk down that street. And my strong inclination would be to give it historic protection, because I know that many of those buildings won't survive without it. But I will echo Jenny that I do think a council member has an obligation, first and foremost, to talk to the people who are actually in that district, in those blocks.
Thank you very much, Maude. Sean?
Yes, yes. Oliver Street is a street that I love to walk down. I think it's a beautiful old street that has that charm that we need to keep in this city. How to do it, I don't know what the specific plan is. I don't know what the details of the plan is, but I'm the type of person that likes to look at an issue, shake it up, understand it from everyone's background, and come to some kind of middle ground. So I think some of the buildings in that area do need a refresh. Oliver Street is beautiful. Some areas near it are definitely need a refresh. A refresh does not mean tearing buildings down. I think some of our areas still need to be redeveloped in a way that still keeps that fundamental look and feel and charm.
Thank you very much, Sean. Susan?
I also know a doctor that used to have his office on Oliver Street. So I don't know if Jenny and Gigi are talking about the same doctor. He has since moved. But I do remember the building being beautiful. And the Mariners Temple is a beautiful site as well. You know, and I saw one of the chat that someone has said that that building needs a lot of work, and it certainly does. I think that one of the issue with historic preservation is how does the city help nonprofits and private owners with their cost of upkeep in terms of following the rules of landmark. Like I said, live in a landmark district, and the work that I had to get done was really expensive. And so we need to look at how we can help those in these special districts to preserve these, beautiful neighborhoods.
Thank you very much, Susan. Tiffany, any doctors in the area?
No doctors in the area, no, but I will say that Mariners Temple was one of the first churches that I visited when I moved to New York City and I was looking for a church home. So I am very familiar with the area. I think it's been said before that we have to make sure that we receive community input. That should be number one on our list. And you know what? While the voices of everyone here on this call tonight will be extremely important, it's people who are not here whose voices need to be heard as well. It's people who are not as active, as engaged, and who will not take the initiative to know what's going on in their community. So it's really important for anyone who's elected to serve on the city council to represent this community, to make sure that they're out in the community listening to the voices of individuals to see what's their input and what they think needs to occur. And if any historical designation will make it feel as though it will not be a community that serves them anymore. So number one, off the top all the time, ensure that we get community input.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Lastly, Chris.
Yes, I support the plan. And I actually know a lot of the organizations, property owners, and small business owners in that neighborhood, whether it's Oliver Coffee, the Jejong Family Association, or even the pizzeria on the corner. And as a council member, what I'll do is go to their doors and educate them the importance of landmarking this district. So you'll see me as a partner because I do think we need to preserve that temple, preserve the school, and preserve the funeral home. They tell a history that no other block does in New York City. So you'll have a partner in me in the city council.
Thank you very much, Chris. Over to you, Richard. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Chinatown's historic core from Canal to Worth Street and the Bowery to Baxter is, though struggling, a vital community and very much loved and visited by New Yorkers as well as visitors. It also serves as a marker for important history of Chinese Americans. Do you have an opinion on how preservation can help retain Chinatown's architecture, history, and culture? How would you account for the diverse opinions and concerns on this subject coming from neighborhood residents and merchants? Oh, and we'll start with Jenny, please.
Sure. During the pandemic, as you probably know, but maybe many of you may not know, that Chinatown was hit very hard, and that part of Chinatown was dead. It was a ghost town. And I and many others who have been fighting to help make sure that we survive, have worked with many of the merchants and leaders on that block. How do we preserve the characteristic of Mott Street from Canal to Worth is a very critical question. I think the first thing we need to do is make sure that the businesses there survive and that we continue to have a vibrant part of Chinatown that where most believe that that's where Chinatown started. And we need to work with the property owners. There's been an effort that I have worked with to put nonprofit community land trust working with owners, not just on that block, but just in the Chinatown core area. And I think that's one way that we can help preserve affordable housing and have the property owners, prevent them from being bought out by big developers.
Thank you, Jenny. Next is Susan.
Thank you for that question, Richard. So early on in my campaign, I stated that I support the Chinatown Working Group plan. And after speaking with property owners in Chinatown, I've had a change of heart because I understand that for them, a lot of them got the buildings from their grandparents or their parents, and the upkeep has been really expensive for them, and to landmark a historic district might put further financial burden on them. And one of the property owners said to me, it would be a shame if I had to sell this building that was passed down from generation to generation to me because I can't afford to go with the upkeep. So those are my concern is, how are we going to help if we do landmark district, how are we going to help property owners with the cost of upkeep? And that is a legitimate concern that is expressed in the community.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, 2 years ago, I sat in a meeting with Historic District Council and property owners in Little Italy. And what we did there was we changed the conversation. Right now, the state, the federal government has so much tax incentives, grants, and loans that gives building owners an opportunity to actually convert their buildings to become landmark or do upkeep. And I think that's where the conversation has to go. One of the biggest fears of property owners, especially mom and pop landlords in Chinatown, is the rise of property tax. And so if you can educate them on how this will actually offset their taxes and allow them to keep their rent stabilized units, we can have a win-win situation of preserving these beautiful buildings, preserving the culture, but also making sure that we keep mom and pop landlords in Chinatown.
Thanks. Tiffany?
So I often say that, District 1 really is oftentimes, a tale of two cities. Unfortunately, we have some of the most expensive zip codes that fall within City Council District 1, and then we have the historic and working class communities of, Chinatown and the Lower East Side. And we need to make sure that as council members, we do our job to ensure that those individuals who have called that community home for years and even decades and for generations, that they're still able to call it home years from now, and, their children and their grandkids. I think that we need to focus on, for sure, making sure that the individual, property owners, small business owners, those who live in rent stabilized buildings, that they are a part of the conversation when any type of, historic changes happen within the community. So it's very important. And I know Jenny mentioned earlier that, at the start of the pandemic, it was absolutely dead over in Chinatown. So I do encourage anyone here who hasn't visited lately to do so and support those small business owners who are in the community. They need us.
Thank you, Tiffany. Maude?
Hi. So two things really quickly. This is the third potential historic district that we're talking about. And at the end of the day, we all keep mentioning community and community input. But in order to get real community input, we're going to have to get off of meetings like this and get back into rooms in person where people can talk to each other, where the crosstalk of people gathering outside the door can happen, and where real community conversations happen. So I think that's critically important. And I also think when it comes to, what Chris mentioned about educating folks, I actually think that education works primarily the other way. I think it's members of the community who can educate council members about what their real expenses are and what really happens when they're running a business and what it really takes to survive. And I think it's the council member's job to listen to the actual people who can explain to a legislative, to an elected official, what burdens they're facing.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I'm actually someone who helps businesses day to day. And I think what we first need to do is understand what the fundamental issues are. I think as I spoke to people living, working, and owning businesses in Chinatown, the biggest issue that they have these days is, first, lack of customers. Number two, food prices going up, their actual COGS going up, and lack of small loans. And what they're generally looking for is short-term bridge loans. And I think the issues come down to understanding what is available. There's a lot of programs. There's SBA programs that will fund $50,000 loans. There's also you can get exemptions from property tax for certain periods of times. So I think the fundamental issue is we need to educate. We need to show and have a true small business incubation center that really functions to help the people coming to these incubation centers. What we have now is not run by professional people.
Thank you. Thank you. So,
Sorry for going over.
Gigi?
Yes, so I think many of you know I live in the historic core of Chinatown. I'm third generation, my family, to live on Pell Street. And this exact conversation happened for 6 years. It was called the Chinatown Working Group, Sub-District A. And I'm the only candidate that was part of that conversation and helped try to broker some of the misunderstandings and try to reach a direction, right? I think that part of the challenge is a lot of these buildings are owned by family associations. And so they have a very different way of operating and thinking. They're also, especially with COVID and the drop in commercial rent, what it costs and how helpful LPC is if they need to make changes is unclear and very intimidating. But I think the other thing that we forget is that there is deeply subsidized, rent controlled and rent stabilized apartments live above these, in the residential. And we need to think about a way that they get tax incentives or tax breaks for this to actually happen.
Thank you. Okay, Juan.
Sorry about that. Next question. How would you address affordability issues in District 1? The current administration's approach has mostly involved upzonings whereby huge bonuses are granted to private developers, and a small percentage of that giveaway is supposed to come back in the form of affordable housing. Do you support this approach? Why not? And if not, what would you do instead? And we'll start with Tiffany.
So ensuring that we have affordable housing in our community is very near and dear to me. I've had the opportunity to serve 3 terms on Community Board 1. And when I was on Community Board 1, I sat on the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, which was headed at that time by the amazing talented Tom Goodkind. And we identified all of the buildings that fell within the CB1 who had received tax breaks, and they were supposed to then turn that over to their residents. That did not happen, but we did put those landlords on notice and we put those residents on notice. And even to this day, 15 plus years later, there are currently lawsuits that are going through the pipeline of people, residents trying to get their money back. So if we are working with any type of developer, tax breaks, local, state level, we need to ensure that those tax breaks are then moved over to the residents so that they most benefit from them. I do believe that our MIH, we need to increase that. It needs to be much higher than what is offered now. And then also let's look at some current buildings that we have to see if we can rehab them to provide affordable housing like vacant hotels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Chris?
I believe MIH has been a failure. I support community-based land use policies like the Chinatown Working Group Plan, which will create affordability overlay for any new developments to have affordable units in them. And also, more importantly, to protect tenants who are in rent stabilized apartments. When you hear this administration about creating affordability, they never actually check the balance to see if it's going to be net positive when it comes to affordable housing. And so I want to not only create new affordable housing, but protect affordability that we have now. I support conversion of hotels and office spaces into new residential, deeply permanent affordable housing, and looking at public land, like the water tunnel sites in Soho for potential affordable housing developments. However, I do think we can't pick community gardens with affordable housing like they did in Elizabeth Street Garden, because we know the value of green and open space, especially after this pandemic.
Thank you very much, Chris. Maude?
Sure. I think at a certain point, some of what gets discussed in the affordable housing conversation, which is obviously important, it amounts to tinkering around the edges, whether you think MIH works and needs to be improved or whether you think it's a failure. At a certain point, we need to build more units. If you think about where we have the density of affordable housing, we have buildings like Confucius Plaza. If someone tried to build a building of that size right now, there'd be immediately a bazillion lawsuits trying to stop it. At a certain point, we actually need to build in order to create more units, because we need to have more housing in order to let the market come into play to some extent in terms of creating the kind of housing market that we want to see, where people who work in our district can afford to live in our district. And we don't have that right now.
Thank you very much, Maude. Sean?
Yeah, I think this is an issue that comes to heart to me. I was a product of being chased out of this city when I was 15 years old because of affordable housing issues. And I think a bunch of other people like me left, and we're having more and more people that are leaving. Think about this. 5% of taxpayers pay 63% of the income tax. And many of those people leaving are actually leaving because they have their second kid and can't afford an apartment with 3 bedrooms. And these are people making good money. They're making 100,000. They're making 150,000. They're making 200,000, and we're losing these people. So we definitely need to build more affordable housing units. And housing units, how and where is the actual issue. Second, for the mid-range, middle class people, we need land trusts. Some cities have these. We have an actual land trust, and that trust is owned by a nonprofit and leases property to tenants.
Thank you, Sean.
The actual land. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No worries. Gigi?
Sure. So I think MIH is one tool that has been used, and it's certainly a flawed tool. I think that there are many unintended consequences, and part of that is because it has become just a checkoff for developers to say, oh, I'm going to give 25%, that's it. I can move on. There needs to be no real conversation afterwards, right? And I point to Essex Crossing as an example of a project that I've worked on for over 10 years that has created over 530 permanently affordable units, many set aside specifically for seniors. And that was a result of a real community-driven process where the community board had an extra land use meeting a month. Many of you were with me during those meetings, and we agreed and we disagreed, but in the end it was a very comprehensive planning approach. And I think that that's what we need, because every site is different and we need to stretch developers, or else they're not going to commit to anything more than they need.
Thank you, Gigi. Susan?
So as I said in the beginning, I grew up in the Lower East Side. My parents live on 12th Street Avenue C at a HDFC building. And, it's affordable housing. And I don't think I would have had the pleasure of living in such a culturally diverse neighborhood if it weren't for the HDFC. But as residents started moving out, some of the units became market rate. And if my parents were in one of those units, they wouldn't be able to stay there. So I do support affordable housing. I think that the MIH is flawed. We need more affordable housing units. We need to expand the AMI ban to allow for truly affordable housing. Because right now, if you look at what is being offered, my parents wouldn't be able to afford the apartment that they're in right now. So we really need to examine it from a two-pronged perspective.
Thank you very much, Susan. Lastly, Jenny?
So affordability has been a big issue, and the pandemic really exacerbated the problem. So I am supportive of using what's vacant today. For example, there's a federal parking garage in the middle of our district that I don't believe belong there, and that should be used to build permanent affordable housing. That's as an example, but I am open to converting hotels or office space into permanently affordable housing. One of the initiatives that I've been working with local small building owner is the community land trust. We need to be able to build more nonprofit community land trusts, include affordable home ownership for those who want to stay. Sean mentioned that people got pushed out, they can't afford it. We need to have both affordable rental and affordable home ownership to enable middle class to stay in our city.
Thank you, Jenny. Richard? You're muted. I got you again.
Yeah, one of these days I'm going to remember to do that, probably when we stop using Zoom. So what measures do you or would you support to help small businesses? And we'll start with Susan.
So right now, small businesses are struggling. And what I propose is a cash grant from the taxes collected so that they could reinvest in the community, hire local hires, local staff members, reinvest in their small businesses. But what I want to do is, instead of and it's already proposed in the council, and I applaud it, but I think we need to push forward is, instead of fining small businesses for minor infractions that do not deal with health and safety, we should give them a warning. When you're at a job, you get written up for something that you did wrong and you could correct it. So I think that we need to do that with small businesses, as long as they're not major infractions that deal with health and safety issues. I think that we should give small businesses a break and help them recover after the pandemic.
Thanks, Susan. Gigi?
Sure. So first, I would support re-upping the legislation where individual small property owners, that they can't be sued and be personally liable through their if they can't pay the rent because of the pandemic. I think the second thing we have to think about is that all of these funds and grants that are coming through, they're not trickling down to the small mom and pops. And we need to think about a better way to get this money truly in the hands of small businesses and not chains, national stores. I think that is, it's very misleading to say we're spending X billions of dollars supporting small businesses when they're not actually getting to the small businesses that you and I consider small businesses. And then I think that we also need to make sure that there is a cash infusion, that it doesn't come with an interest rate or a repayment, and so that they can get back on their feet faster.
Thank you. Next is Tiffany.
So I think that most of us know that small businesses are the backbones of many of our communities, especially in Council District 1. So one of the things that we need to focus on is giving them no string attached grants. There have been low interest loans that you'll pay back over a longer period of time, but at the end of the day, it's still a loan and it has to be paid back. So we need to put money and cash in the hands of small business owners so they can spend as they see fit. We have an infusion of cash that have come in because of COVID relief, and we need to make sure that it goes directly to them. I think we also need to focus on making sure that we pass the SBJSA. We need to ensure that there are long-term leases for these small business owners. Number one, it helps them. It can help them focus on growth and not have to worry about if they have to renew their lease to 1 or 2 years. And it also provides some stability for the residents of the community to know that, an institution that they love will be there for years to come, and they won't have to worry about it moving because they can no longer afford the rent.
Thanks, Tiffany. Chris?
Yes, before this pandemic, we had a small business crisis. This isn't new in our district, whether it was on Bleecker Street, Chinatown, or down the Lower East Side. We've seen the vacant sign way too much in this district. And so passing the Small Business Survival Job Act is long overdue. We also need to have a rent stabilization bill for commercial use as well, so people can actually invest in our community for the long term, not just on 1, 2, or 3 year leases. And also we have to pass community-based land use policy, which will limit speculation, right? The biggest reasons a lot of small businesses close throughout this district is because of property tax. And property tax has been going up 25% almost every year for the past 4 years. A lot of those taxes get passed through to the small businesses because they can't increase the prices of rental units. And so we have to make sure that we take big steps, whether it's on land use or passing legislation to keep small businesses where they're at.
Thanks. Jenny?
So the small businesses are the pillars of our community. Not only they are they help the vibrancy of the community, but they hire local people. That's what keeps people employed. I have been a community banker making loans to women and minority-owned businesses for 15 years. And post 9/11, my team and I used the SBA and the Economic Development Corporation's special programs to help many of the small businesses downtown got back on their feet and thrive. So in the post-pandemic, we need to continue to help our small business with not only cash infusion, but many, someone else mentioned about fines. We need to make sure that there is cure period for violations that are not at risk to the public health and otherwise. We need to make sure that small business services are more proactive and provide in-language support for many businesses whose language proficiency in English is not their best. And that's what we need to do to help them.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I think first we need to focus on what the fundamental issue is. And there's just a lot less people visiting places because our streets are not safe anymore because of this defund the police rhetoric and changes in New York City Council rules and also state rules. Number two, we have a budget that's so bloated and it just goes to waste, and taxes are going up. And a lot of us here are always talking about handouts, spending more. Where does this money come from? It comes from more tax. We need to lower taxes. We need to have safe streets. We need to have schools that will encourage more people to move back to the city. And if we don't, all of the handouts that people are actually talking about won't work. We can't just print money. So, whenever I hear that this issue, we solve a problem with money, it hasn't worked in the last 5 years. Our major problems happened in this 5 years. And I think we need to focus on accountability of government and lowering taxes.
Thank you. Maude?
Sure. Well, I'm going to combine part of Sean's answer and part of Gigi's answer because I think they work well together. We have to lower our taxes, our property taxes, and in so doing, that is the most effective program to help small businesses. Right. There are a lot of complicated and even not so complicated plans to give cash grants, which may work well for some businesses, but that don't make it to all of them. And the federal stimulus money will be spent wisely or not, depending on what happens in the next few months, but it will dry up, unfortunately, sooner than I think it should. But what we really need to do is lower property taxes because businesses across a range of profitability need lower taxes in order to stay in the city. And we can most effectively and most intelligently deliver that relief that will allow businesses to survive of all sizes and ranges by lowering the taxes.
Thank you. Juan, you're up.
Thank you, Richard. Next question. What is your position on making outdoor dining permanent across the board? And if you disagree with this approach, what would you propose and what would you support? And we're going to start with Maude.
Okay, great. There's lots of outdoor dining that I'm enjoying all the time with my family, and it would be nice to allow it to stay to some extent. I do think the speed with which some of these structures went up presents some problems that we should be able to revisit. Right now, I think the restaurants, we engaged in what was essentially a taking when we shut down businesses that really didn't need to be shut down for the length of time that we did. And allowing those businesses to try to recoup some of the losses by holding on to the outdoor dining, I think makes sense for some period of short term. But I don't think every structure that went up needs to stay, both in terms of the safety of the structures themselves, but also in terms of the street safety, in terms of street crossing, in terms of bicycling, in terms of pedestrian, because some of them present some real challenges.
Thank you, Maude. Susan?
So I do not support the permanent use of outdoor dining sheds. I've actually spoken with people that live in narrow streets in the district where emergency vehicles had a hard time getting through. I understand that we need to help small businesses, restaurant owners recoup the losses that they've experienced. However, I think that we need to do it in a responsible manner. Perhaps we can revisit it and look at it from a street sidewalk cafe permit example. And also we need to have rules and regulations if we are to go forward with it. How safe are these structures? How are they made? I mean, some of them are just thrown together last minute. So I think that it's really important to examine it going forward. But however, I do not support the permanent use of it. Restaurants are open at 75% capacity. They're going to soon be open at 100%. So I think that we really need to re-examine how we use these outdoor dining sheds going forward. And the timer disappeared, so I don't know. Sorry.
No worries.
Because I ran over.
Thank you, Susan. Chris.
Yeah, I agree with Susan. There shouldn't have been a blanket approval for all outdoor dining areas, especially for them to be permanent. We have to revisit each one of them, similar to what we do in the sidewalk cafe, but we also have to make sure that we do it in conjunction with Department of Transportation, Department of Sanitation, and Department of Consumer Affairs to make sure that these are safe, not only the structure, but health-wise, and making sure that we don't close some of these narrow streets that, for example, our seniors need to get on their assessor ride. And so we have to revisit this. We have to make sure there's community input, and we have to make sure there's a process in place for approval.
Thank you, Chris. Jenny.
So in order for us to help the restaurants and small businesses get back on their feet, I support the outdoor dining to be extended to a period of time. But as far as making it permanent, we need to look at community by community, street by street, because people's safety is the most important thing. And having some areas whether or not they should have outdoor dining shed on is questionable. But we need to, like anything else that we do, my philosophy is that you do need to involve the local community, the restaurant owners, the residents of the community, and other small businesses in the community to determine whether or not a street should have permanent outdoor dining or not.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Gigi.
Sorry, I had to unmute. So I think that during COVID, the massive rollout of outdoor dining was necessary to kind of inject energy and support for small businesses, but I do not support the permanent approach to outdoor dining. I think that, look, I live on Pell Street, which is a short street, one way. And with the outdoor structures and kind of the restaurants taking up a growing amounts of blocks, and then you add on trash, right? You add on weekend noise. There are a lot of quality of life issues. The community boards and the SLA committees of each of the community boards, 1, 2, and 3, spend hours and hours and hours thinking about common sense, quality of life issues that impact neighbors, that impact blocks, that impact adjoining blocks. And none of these things are taken into consideration when you have these outdoor dining structures. Some of them are so large, they're taking up an entire sidewalk with no penalty. And I think that
Thank you, Gigi. Tiffany?
So I do support the continuation of the outdoor cafe options. If we know that COVID relief is going to dry up eventually, and if we know that we don't want to necessarily continue to give handouts, we have to ensure that small business owners have a way in order to support themselves. In order to make money as a small business owner, it is very difficult in New York City, and we need to do as much as possible to make it easier for them. So yes, there should be a process in place very similar to the sidewalk cafes where restaurants have to apply And also, we talk about the different structures and how they look and how they're disjointed and, all out of whack. This is an opportunity for the city to come in and say, look, these are 3 options that you can choose from that your small business can use for outdoor structure. One that is very cost efficient, one that is mid-range, and one that's a little bit more higher in cost. And we can do this and we can try to streamline the process so that we can make sure that these small business owners can really start to get back on their feet.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Lastly, Sean.
Yeah, I'm not for the permanent having streets closed and also permanently blocking sidewalks. However, I think we should focus on super blocks, or some places call it economic opportunity zones. And I think for certain areas, we should definitely have streets closed at certain periods of time. And I think that's how we can accommodate for struggling businesses. Now, also what's happening now is you see the struggle is no longer a struggle. There's some businesses now that are making huge windfalls, much more than previously, because of the outside dining. Now, should we be taking that from them? No, this needs to be case by case, right? Some streets it makes sense. Some streets it just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. And I think what we need to start doing now is deeming street by street which ones do make sense and which ones don't, and also having these super blocks for certain areas where we do have streets closed.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Richard.
Thanks, Juan. Who are you supporting for mayor or any of the city offices for 2021, and why? Oh, starting with Jenny. You're muted, Jenny.
I'm sorry. Someone came into my office and distracted me. I didn't hear you.
Oh,
My
sure.
apologies.
Who are you supporting for mayor or any other city offices in 2021, and why?
The only decision that I have made in the other elected offices is I'm supporting Corey Johnson for New York City Comptroller. He is a leader who leads with passion and with heart, and is someone who is very committed to serving the city of New York.
Thank you. Sean?
Go Ray, go! I'll have to say Ray McGuire. I actually like him because he's an experienced leader and he is focusing on answers. And I think what we need to look to these days is more people that are experienced leaders from the outside, or we're going to be stuck with the same crap we're stuck with right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Gigi?
Yes, so for mayor, I am supporting Andrew Yang. I believe that we need leadership that will bring in new ideas and is not beholden to any sort of political establishment. And for borough president, I am supporting Mark Levine. I have had the opportunity to work with him in the city council, and I think that he brings a very down-to-earth and sensible approach to a very diverse borough of Manhattan.
Thank you. Tiffany?
So I haven't made my final decision about mayor's race. I'm very thankful, like many of us, that it is ranked choice voting this year, so we'll be able to select up to top 5 of our candidates. So I really appreciate that. I will say that I have committed to State Senator Kevin Parker for comptroller. He's done amazing work, in the legislature. He's, very active on, focusing on telecommunications and energy. And I think that he'll, bring energy to the role as comptroller. But I have a couple more days left before early voting begins, and I will sit down and make out my list of top 5 and go and cast my vote.
Thank you. Chris?
I'm undecided for mayor now. I've changed my position a number of times just because of the scandals that have come out, but I'm definitely not voting for a mayor that wants to build a casino on Governor's Island. So I'm gonna look at what mayor's position are when it comes to land use decisions in our neighborhood. One of the candidates that I am supporting publicly is Alvin Bragg for Manhattan DA. I think we need real reform, and I think he can bring that to that office.
Thank you. Maude?
I haven't changed my position about mayors. I said previously, and I'll say again, I think Eric Adams and Catherine Garcia are the two best first choice and second choice candidates in the mayor's race.
Thank you. And Susan?
Sorry. I am gonna agree with Sean. I like Ray McGuire. He has a really good plan on education. It's really hard. I don't agree with a lot of the candidates on everything, the mayoral candidates. And, you know, even with the education, I don't agree with Ray on everything. However, he does really want to invest in early childhood education. And I strongly believe that we need to start educating children young and provide quality education. And so I support him because of that. And he also has a really strong small business revival plan that I am very supportive of. So right now it's Ray McGuire.
Thank you. So now we'd like to have closing statements.
No, we have Q&A.
Oh, thank you.
So now we have a few minutes. We don't have that much time, but we have a few minutes to take questions from the audience. If you have not put your question in the chat, you may do so now. Some folks already have. And then for the candidates, if you do not have to answer each question, but if you would like to answer the question that is posed, raise your hand and we'll get to you. You will again get 1 minute maximum for each question. So Richard, do you want to take the first one or you want me to take the first one?
You can go ahead, Juan.
Okay, I'll take the first one. So the question is the following. For years, there has been cooperation between District 1 and District 2. And so the question is whether you would continue this practice, what your approach to that would be, and with regard to what issues. Okay, so Susan?
I think we need to work with other districts, neighboring district, even with District 3. You know, I think that it's really important because our residents don't just stay in one district. They, you know, they travel, they commute, they go all to different places. So I think it's really important for us to work with other council members in other districts in terms of having some holistic approach to issues that are of concern to the community.
Thank you, Susan. Jenny, you raise your hand.
I did, yes. So I have already began working with council members in the neighboring district. Councilmember Carlina Rivera has endorsed me and we've been working together. I also have an excellent relationship with a leading candidate in Council District 3, that's Eric Botcher. I have already spoken with him about the the alternate site to build affordable housing and preserve the Elizabeth Street Garden. We will be working together, and Councilmember Powell has been campaigning with me. He's in District 4, so I am already working with these council members who will be council members, or those who will be council members. It is very important for us to collaborate. Susan is right. Residents don't care about council district when they want to look for housing, when they see green space, and when they have schools. Wherever it is that the establishment that meets their need, they will go. So we have to work together, and that's what I will be doing.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Tiffany?
So yes, I do believe in working together, collective action to make the city work for each and every person. But one thing that we have to make sure that we don't forget when we are considering, reaching our hands over to work with other districts is that we will be elected to represent the residents of Council District 1. So we need to make sure whatever decisions that are being made while we are sitting on the City Council that will impact them will be the best decision for this particular community, this particular district. So working across the board with other districts, very important, but we can't forget, ultimately who elected us to serve in this position.
Thank you, Tiffany. Gigi?
Yes, so I absolutely agree. And I think I got a very good crash course in that, serving on Community Board 3 for 10 years, because it encompasses part of Councilmember Carlina Rivera's district. I think one area that we have not talked about when we talked about affordable housing and comprehensive planning is public housing and NYCHA. And so because there's such a large number of NYCHA units along both council districts 1 and 2, that is an area that we have to work together on and think very comprehensively on when it comes to planning.
Thank you very much, Gigi. Chris?
I think we should work with other council members, but more importantly, we have to keep them accountable. We see it with East River Park. It's a disastrous plan. The city is not willing to release information to the public. And so even though it's not mostly in my district, a lot of my residents enjoy that space. And so it's making sure that we stand up to other council members and say, no, you can't move forward with this plan. We already had a plan in place that was led by the community, and we have to make sure that we stick with that plan. And I don't think you can hold them accountable if they're helping you to get elected. And so that's why we run a really grassroots independent campaign. We don't rely on other elected officials to endorse us to win. We rely on community members and community groups to help us to win.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sean?
Yeah, I think the number one issue that actually happens is what Chris just said. People get cozy with other people and are not willing to actually stand up and say no. District 2 and 3 will affect District 1. Our priority needs to be District 1, District 2, and District 3 issues. But of course, we should work with everyone else. But I think we should also be strong enough to stand up and be true independents and not just be part of this democratic establishment that we have that has sold our land, our valuable land, because they are broke, and they are broke because they overspend, and the waste and abuse that's going on in this government must stop. And I think that is going to come through not a comptroller, but a true independent audit board. I actually worked with an audit board overseas in South Korea. Have a true independent audit board that's not controlled by politics, we might see change.
Thank you very much, Sean. Richard?
Okay. What are your feelings about or policies concerning taking campaign contributions from real estate developers?
If you have your hand up from the previous round, please lower it unless you want to speak again.
Jenny?
So I am not taking, I have not, and I'm not taking any contribution from real estate developers. I believe that I'm elected by the people of the residents of District 1. I will listen to the folks who are voters in District 1, not the developers.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sean?
Yeah, I'm actually not even taking matching funds. I didn't register for the actual program, and I don't believe in taking matching funds right now when we have an actual city that's broken in serious desperation. So I mainly self-funded this, and I also got I also got contributions from some friends, very modest. But no, I don't believe taking any contributions from anyone that can fundamentally affect how I will act in the future. It's not something that I feel comfortable with. We are able to run for a seat like this, a very frugal campaign. Other people here have taken funds and taking 130, 140,000 for the primary and 180, 190,000 for the total period, leading up to over $300,000, most of it government funds. And I think that's wrong. This can be spent for much better things.
Thank you. Gigi, did I see your hand up?
Yes, so I am not taking money from developers, anyone that works for developer. I'm also not taking any money from any lobbyists, because many lobbyists, their job is to influence on behalf of developers.
Thank you. Chris, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I'm not taking any money from real estate developers. And as Gigi said, lobbyists. Lobbyists represents a lot of the special interests that are in our government that create really bad land use policy. But I'm happy to say that most of my donations, almost 80%, comes from in-district, and we have the lowest contribution average. So we're being funded by the people that live in this district and not outside money.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Susan. Oh, you're muted. Susan, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I haven't taken any contributions from developers. Actually, when I first started the campaign, I actually asked my campaign manager, I was like, my cousin's a real estate agent and I made a pledge not to take real estate money. Can I take that donation? And he said, yes, that's your cousin, so you can. Also, I'm very careful in terms of my pledges, you know, and I haven't gotten any money from lobbyists. It's a grassroots campaign. All my donations came from individuals that I know personally, or through meeting them on canvassing and while I'm petitioning. So there hasn't been any donation that's made by someone that I don't know or haven't met.
Thank you. Any other
And
hand?
I'll
Tiffany?
just add, I'm sorry, I'll just add that I am not taking money from developers either. I am participating in the city's matching funds program. I would not be able to do that as a Black woman who does not come from any amount of type, you know, generational wealth. If it was not for that program, I would not be able to participate and run to serve, you know, my community that I've loved so much for the last 15 plus years on the city council. So I think it is a great program as long as you're abiding by all the rules. And so kudos for anyone who's done that work, who's gotten that donation in order to meet that threshold.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, here's another question. What is your position on member deference in city council? This is the informal practice of voting along with a council member in whose district an issue is construed to unfold. Jenny?
So I want to add that I'm not accepting money from lobbyists as well. For in terms of member deference, when you have a council member who truly believe that her job is to represent the people who elect you, then I believe member deference is warranted because she is representing voting on behalf of the views and the wishes of the people who elected her. So I am someone who listens to voters and believe in the path to resolution of any issues that will benefit the most people and doing the most good. So I am in favor of member deferences because of how I conduct myself and how I believe a council member should be conducting themselves.
Thank you, Jenny. Susan?
Yes, I support member deference. I think that one of the things that, you know, I do disagree with what Councilmember Chin has done on two of the issues. One is, you know, the building on Bowery and also on Governor's Island. I agree with Jenny. We need to represent our community. We are the voice of the community. We will be elected to be the voice of our community. I think that, you know, with member deference, what we saw it at the Gowanus, where, you know, Councilmember Machaja was against the rezoning, upzoning, and members from, you know, the Bronx came in and took it over. So I think that, you know, we need to support member deference because they are truly the voice of the community if they use it properly.
Chris? Thank you, Susan.
I support member deference when it comes to smaller in-district land use items. However, if this is going to have an effect on our district or working people in our district, you have to stand up and voice your opinion. You know, you can't, it's really hard to do that with every single project across the city. But if something's happening, let's say south of 14th Street, I'm gonna listen to the residents. I'm gonna work with organizations like here that are here today to make my own independent decision.
Thank you, Chris. Tiffany?
Yes, I will be elected to serve the residents of the community and to meet their needs. I think first and foremost, I have to make sure that any, you know, vote that's taken when I'm elected to the New York City Council is a vote that's going to really help the entire community in which I was elected to serve. So that has to be number one off the bat, thinking about the residents.
Thank you, Tiffany. Gigi?
Yeah, so like many of the other candidates, I do support member deference. I think the other issue is that, we get to all serve on committees, and those responsibilities should be taken very seriously. And we have an obligation as one of, 51 council members to also make sure that we are active participants and really go out of our way to understand every issue that we're voting on. But at the end of the day, we are voted in by the residents of Council District 1, and they are the ones that I will be representing.
Thank you, Gigi. Anyone else? Richard?
Some of you have touched on this previously, but I think it's worth getting into a little bit more. Who supports the Chinatown Working Group plan, and what is the specific you particularly like about it, or maybe what do you particularly think is a shortcoming of it? Any takers? Yes, Chris?
Yes, I support the Chinatown Working Group plan in its entirety. If we would have passed it 8 years ago, we wouldn't have the threat of luxury towers in the Two Bridges neighborhood. We wouldn't even have the threat of this mega jail in Chinatown. I've been endorsed by a lot of members of the Chinatown Working Group plan because I'm committed to passing this as one of my first action as your next city council member.
Thank you. Gigi, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, so look, it really frustrates me, I guess, when we try to boil down whether we support something that's over 250 pages and every single sub-district has an option A and an option B. So it's like, what are you really supporting, right? I was co-chair of the Chinatown Working Group. I was on the executive committee of the Chinatown Working Group. I'm the only candidate in this whole race that went to Chinatown Working Group meetings for the 8 years where it had over 40 members. And so I think that there are portions of the Chinatown Working Group a plan that I support, for example, the Two Bridges contextual rezoning. I support aspects of what we want to do to preserve NYCHA, although the state and the federal government never came to our meetings or wanted to be part of that discussion. So I think there's more work to be done, but I think it is a great foundation for discussion.
Thank you. Jenny?
Chris, would you please clarify that you said that your flyer said that you were endorsed unanimously by the Chinatown Working Group, and now you're saying that you're endorsed by some of the members of the Chinatown Working Group. And the Chinatown Working Group is made up of mostly 501c3 organizations, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the Chinatown Working Group is its own organization. It's a collection of members. And as the members, they have unanimously endorsed me. I could send you the minutes if that's what you want, Jenny, about that.
No, I don't need to. I was just wondering, because the Chinatown Working Group was made up with many 501c3 organizations. That's just a question. I thought 501c3 organizations are not endorsing political.
Maybe we should just stick with the questions that we have in the chat here.
And Richard, I'll just answer this question. There's many organizations that are on this call that are 501c3s, but they're members of other organizations and groups. And so them as independent members can endorse this through that group, but not through their 501c3.
So, Jenny,
Chinatown Working Group.
Would you like to answer the question about whether you support the Chinatown Working Group?
I just have a question for Chris. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other hands here?
Yeah,
No.
I mention that I as well support the Chinatown Working Group. Whenever you have a group of residents, the community that comes together and they strongly believe in something, we need to make sure that we're listening to them as city council candidates and ultimately as elected city officials. One thing that I do like to add that, we often hear that we need to work with developers so that they can build. And we've seen, unfortunately, a lot of, landlords who are warehousing apartments. So when we talk about that, we don't have enough affordable housing for people within our district, and we need to make sure that we upzone and build super talls. That's not necessarily always the case. We do need to make sure that apartments that are available, that can be on the market, that they're not being warehoused by landlords so people can just move into them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Well, sorry, I raised my hand. In the interest of time, I was going to try to just put my answers in the chat, but I'll jump in on this one. I think
I can't see when the people raise their hands digitally. I think I can only see it when you actually, put your hand.
Oh, okay, I can do that too. I have it on my screen though.
Thank you.
Uh, I think Gigi made a very fair point about the Chinatown Working Group, and the reality is, so it's a hard plan in which to say you support it in its entirety or not. But I will say that we have a pretty amazing district in terms of the depth of knowledge and skills that we have coming out of different communities. So we have a lot of great plans in addition to the Chinatown Working Group that come out of community organizations. And, one of those things is the plan to rehabilitate Rikers Island. We have a lot of candidates who want to not build a new jail and close Rikers Island, which leaves us with nowhere to house incarcerated people. And so those are the hard questions that aren't being asked when it comes to building in our district.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? And please raise your hand like manually as opposed to digitally.
So to speak.
So to speak. Okay.
All right, so let's move on. We're running out of time. We want to have enough time to get to closing statements. You each get 1 minute, and we go in the reverse order in which we did the opening one. So we start with you, Tiffany.
Great. Well, thanks once again for allowing me to come here tonight and share a little bit more about my campaign and why I should be elected to serve this community on the New York City Council. I would like to add that I believe in New York City and being the change that you want to see. My mission is all about community building and leading with empathy. That is of most importance to me. There has been dramatic change in District 1 over the last 15 plus years that I've called this place home, and I am committed to affordable housing, small business, COVID relief, and making sure that we have equity in education across the board so that all of our students will receive an education that is to be applauded. And then ensuring that we have resources for our families and our seniors so that they can age in place and they can continue to call District 1 in Lower Manhattan their home. Please visit my website at tiffanyfornyc.com to learn even more. We are, right at the edge of election cycle. If you want to volunteer, fill out a volunteer form and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Chris?
Yes, first of all, thank you for hosting this forum. As everyone on this call knows, our district is at a crossroad, right? For the past 12 years, we allow developer-driven plans to move forward. And thanks to many of us in the community, we have tried to stop it. Whether it's the upzoning of Soho, NoHo, the Howard Hughes development, the 2 bridges. And we need a council member that's gonna listen to our community, work with us. And I have a track record and experience of doing just that. When tenants at 85 Barry were being evicted, I was their first phone call. We helped organize the community to actually, after 9 months, help them move back in. When the mayor proposed a mega jail in Chinatown, I helped co-founded NUBC to help educate and organize neighbors to fight against that and teach people what criminal justice reform should look like. I already have the track record of working with our community. I look forward to working with everyone here as your next council member. So thank you so much for this evening. It was a great debate.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Maude?
Sure. Yes. Thank you everyone very much for hosting us this evening. And it was great to see all of my fellow candidates. I will say that one thing that we haven't touched on a whole lot, given that we're talking about what the shape of our district will look like and the skyline of our district will look like, is the jail that's proposed for downtown. And that conversation, it greatly impacts all of the downtown neighborhoods, but it needs to be a solution-oriented conversation. If we're not going to build a jail and we're going to close Rikers Island, we have to build structures that can be used appropriately to house people in a way that's humane and that's 21st century and that's not violating the human rights of people that are incarcerated. I don't understand the position that many of my fellow candidates have to close down Rikers and not build a jail, because that really leaves us without a solution as a city and it doesn't make sense. I think we need to have a solution-oriented conversation when it comes to how to prevent the borough-based jails, which I think we all do agree on.
Thanks a lot, Maude. Jenny?
Well, thank you for hosting tonight's forum, and thank you, Richard and Juan, for doing such a great job moderating 7 people speaking. I am someone who have been working in the district as a volunteer while holding a corporate job for 30 years. And it's because of the work that I have done. Many have asked me to run for office for years. And after seeing the devastation caused by COVID, I am ready to jump off the sideline and get into helping our district and residents of our community at the city council. The folks who have been supporting me have made contributions, volunteer and elected officials like the 3 congressional members in our district, Congressmember Nadler, Maloney, and Velasquez have endorsed me, along with many mainstream unions like UFT, DC 37, 32BJ, New York Central Labor Council. They believe in me because I can get the job done and no training needed starting on day 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Susan?
Thank you for everyone. Thank you everyone for hosting, and thank you to my fellow candidates for joining me here tonight. I just want to share that I am a lifelong New Yorker. I grew up in the Lower East Side. I've actually stayed in the city my entire life. I didn't even leave to go to college. So I am keenly connected to the city, but also, living in a historical district, opens up a lot of opportunities for me to see what a beautiful city we live in. We need to plan responsibly. We need to have sustainable development, but also at the same time, rehab, retrofit, and perhaps reuse whatever we have right now and make it in compliance with the 21st century. I think that we need to stop demolishing and building these tall, glassy buildings in our district. It has no place here.
Thank you very much, Susan. Gigi?
So I want to thank all of the sponsors today for putting this forum together. Having served on the community board, I had the opportunity to work with many of you. And, while we may not always agree, you will always know where I stand. You will always have a seat at the table to have that conversation and think about what we can do better. I truly believe that that is what a good elected official should do. And when it comes to landmarks and preservation, I think that, the journey around 70 Mulberry Street, the building is a perfect example of where we are able to find a solution where there is a preservation study before we move forward with, what will eventually be on that site. So I look forward to working with many of you on these issues as council member. So thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Gigi. And Sean, you get the last, well, no, you don't. I get the last word. But you get to go now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm Juan Hayes. I'm very, very happy to be here. This was a very, very good forum. It was actually an informative forum. So I think, first of all, Juan, Richard, you did a fantastic job. I hope we can have some follow-up to all of this too, and we can all interact and all learn, all experience what we actually need, and come forward with real solutions. I think that's what we need to focus on these days. Getting experienced leaders that really have real solutions, are actually willing to hear voters and not just hear them to react, but hear to understand. And I think once we finally get this, and we haven't had it for a long time in this city, and this is, I believe, the fundamental problem that we have with our city these days. It is our politics. Our politics are broken. We need to get back to the time of Koch, where Koch would be proud to say he was a sane liberal.
Thank you very much, Sean. So thank you so much to our candidates, to co-sponsors, and our audience. As a reminder, tonight's forum was recorded and will be available for viewing and sharing on the Village Preservation website and YouTube page in about a day or two. We will also be sharing the candidates' responses to our questionnaires. So go to villagepreservation.org, and those should be available by Thursday or Friday at the absolute latest. And remember, primary day is Tuesday, June 22nd. Don't forget to vote. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.